Hey, it's me, MLV. Here is By Demand Yet Again, part 2 of You Lose. Now, in this part 2, I've written in a character who is very Aussie, like grew up in Tamworth type Aussie. Tamworth is out in the middle of nowhere, so you get my drift. He will have a lot of Aussie slang, so I'll drop the meanings in the description for those who are curious, but I hope you like him. So let's get to it. This is You Lose, part 2, Villain Bakugou x Female Listener. Hey Dave, you greeted the warden as you entered the small surveillance room, closing the door behind you before sitting down the chair next to him. G'day, Yinny, Dave greeted you in return, looking from the 4 camera screens to you, then back to the screens again. What's he been up to? You asked, jerking your head towards the footage on the screen, which showed Bakugou sitting in the holding cell with his hands in the quirk-cancelling cuffs. Nothing much, Dave replied with a stretch, arms up over his head as he leaned back on the chair. I've been on since midnight. An old mate here hasn't tried a thing. Well, that's good, I guess, you mused, squinting at the footage and checking that the date and time were still current to make sure the screens hadn't frozen. Has he moved at all? You then asked. Yeah, just to stretch his legs or something. I don't know. He's still alive in there, Dave replied. You hummed. Well, I can take it from here, Dave, if you want to have a break. Really? He asked, almost with childlike excitement. I'm dying for a Ciggy. And some grub. You want anything from Maccas? Let's go and do a Maccas run. Actually, that sounds good. Just get my usual, he replied with a smile as he stood up. Yeah, no worries. You want Chippies? Yeah, he replied as he hopped across to his chair. Righto. They better not be out of ice cream. Every bloody time I go there, they're out of ice cream, he lamented angrily. Don't worry, Dave. There's a corner store you can get ice cream from, you offered in replacement of the Macdonalds ice cream. Corner store? I was thinking Servo. You got Gaytimes there. Haven't had a Gaytime in Yonks. Yeah, okay, you do you, Dave. I'll see you in a half hour, you said with a confused smile. Yeah, righto. Just gonna Bundy Off, then I'll skip down there, grab a bun, chips and ice cream, fly back, he replied as he headed for the door. God, I wish he spoke in English, you thought as you shook your head, then looked back at the screens. Bakugou still hadn't moved, and you checked all angles of the camera again before settling your gaze on the camera that looked directly into his face. He had his head down a little, but by the way his eyes remained wide open and alert, you knew he hadn't completely settled and had switched off. While you watched him, you heard Dave leave, the telltale sound of the front door to the station closing and echoing through the halls. Bakugou lifted his head slightly, and his intense red eyes shifted to the door. He was still covered in splatters of blood, his right eye looked slightly swollen and bruised too, while his physique remained as cut as ever. All fell back into silence as Dave left, and your eyes were drawn to Bakugou's hand as he shifted them a little. He'd better not try anything funny, you thought as you watched him slowly rotate his wrist. I think he thinks he's alone. He pulled on his restraints a little, his biceps bulging as he did so. Then his eyes travelled back to the camera that was directly in front of him and he glared into it. You almost felt like he could see you through the lens, because he smirked and then dropped his head back down. Thought I was alone, he said loudly. Your heartbeat increased and you reached for the microphone to talk to him. I'm still here, he replied, holding the intercom button down as your lips grazed the mic. He looked up into the camera again when he heard your voice and ran his tongue along his bottom lip before speaking again. It ain't over between us, hero. Oh, I think it is, villain, he replied smartly. He smirked and scrunched his hand into a fist, then opened it and shot a small explosion from his palm into the wall of the cell. What the? You gasped when you saw him use his quirk. He's not supposed to be able to use his quirk in those cuffs, you thought as you jumped up, knocking your chair backwards. Come and play with me, he called as he stood up from his chair and fought against the restraints. Freaking out slightly, you turned and ran from the surveillance room, down the stairs to his holding cell, while fumbling with the keys in hand. If I rush straight in, he's going to be behind the door waiting to grab me, you thought, grabbing for the doorknob and shoving the key into the lock. Knowing what he was going to do, you quickly entered the room, while locking the door in the process, then slamming it closed and jumping away, narrowly missing Bakugou throwing both of his cuffed hands at you in an attempt to knock you out. Gotta be quick, boy, you teased him as you made a sand mound to lift you up above him. Angered that he couldn't use his quirk well enough, Bakugou relied on chasing you and throwing cuffed hand punches at you, but you were far too quick for him, and once you had taunted him around the room a few times, you finally threw yourself at him from your sand mound and connected with him, your legs hooking over his shoulders as you knocked him backwards, landing him on his back with your ass on his chest. "How are you still able to use your quirk?" you interrogated down to him, your right palm on his forehead with your fingers scrunched into his blonde, messy hair. Suddenly his legs were around your upper body as he hooked them over you and threw you backwards, which you somersaulted out over and jumped backwards while he still remained on the floor. "Answer me," you demanded, jumping onto his chest again, but with your body pinning his arms down and your right leg pinning his right leg down. He gave you a deep chuckle as his chest rose and fell under your hands. "As if I'd tell you," he sneered up at you. "You're an asshole, but you're hot," you admitted, lifting off him a little so you could drag your fingers down his defined abs. Sitting back, straddling his hips and hands in cuffs, you reached back to feel his hands and the cuffs behind you while you stared down at him. His eyes travelled down your chest, checking you out, before coming back up to your face again. "You're not exactly ugly yourself," he uttered in a low, raspy voice, his comment making you a little flustered and preventing you from focusing on feeling around his cuffs for the answer of him being able to use his quirk. "Huh, you think flirting's going to make me go soft for you?" you teased. "Not flirting. Flirting's for wimps. I state facts," he replied, his eyes darting to your lips. "Don't test me, Bakugou," you said in a threatening voice, letting go of the cuffs behind you and reaching for his jaw so you could push a thumb up under his jawbone. He let you push his head up, but his crimson eyes remained on you and he smirked. "If I wasn't cuffed, I'd force you to kiss me," he admitted. "What if it's the reverse?" you asked, leaning over him until your lips met his. Surprisingly, he didn't try to escape in the heat of the moment, and as you kissed, your tongues got involved, and it went from light kissing to full-on making out when all of a sudden the door flew open and in stumbled Dave. "Streuth," he said with a surprised look on his face as he looked around the room at the piles of sand while you hurriedly broke away from the kiss. "What the bloody hell happened in here?" "He can use his quirk," you said quickly, getting up off Bakugou. "I was checking to find out how that was possible." Dave gave you a sly look, then glanced at Bakugou on his back on the floor. "Did she attack your mouth with hers, mate?" he asked. Before Bakugou could answer, another officer entered the room out of breath. "We believe," the new officer puffed, "that he stole an item from the other room that he was in." What did he steal?" you asked. "Screw," the officer panted. You looked down at Bakugou. Then you and Dave got him back up. With a bit of a struggle, you managed to find out that yes, Bakugou had somehow managed to get a screw and had jammed it up inside the cuff mechanism, short-circuiting it a little. "You cunning bastard," Dave said in disbelief as he pulled it free. "Go to hell," Bakugou snarled. "Looks like we'll be shipping you off first thing tomorrow morning, mate. You're on the express train to Tartus," Dave said as he adjusted the cuffs for the time being. The two officers left after that, and you turned to go, but Bakugou grabbed your arm to stop you a moment. "When I get free, I'm coming for you," he said. But the way he said it, it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And you kind of liked that. And there is the end of part 2. Hope you enjoyed it, despite my dishwasher in the background. Hopefully the backing track covers that. I will be adding more parts to Stuck Together, Chaos in Thirds, 50 Ways to Kiss, because Toto Rock Hard On has just discovered intimacy and wants more. Lol. That's just to name a few. Oh, and as well as another Shoji one-shot, because we love Mr. Triple Hugs. So stay tuned for those, and I'll see you in the next one-shot, or if you're following the Serendipity series, I'll see you tomorrow.